friends. On a special kind of quickie edition of Lisa, Hendey and Friends, I've got an extra podcast this week for you. And this features my interview with producer and all-around amazing talent, Brigham Taylor. Brigham is the producer on the brand new film from Disney, Christopher Robin, opening wide in theaters this weekend. And I'm happy to share a conversation that we had. Before we jump into it, I thought I'd play the trailer for this absolutely charming film. Again, it's kind of a re-examination of the classic Winnie the Pooh stories told by A.A. Milne and now re-envisioned for a whole new generation. So here is the official trailer for Christopher Robin.
I do like a party.
Come on, Pooh.
What should happen if you forget about me?
Silly old bear. I won't ever forget about you, Pooh. I promise. Not even when I'm 100.
We should be working this weekend, Robin.
But I promised my wife and daughter I'd take them away this weekend.
All hands on deck.
You won't be coming to the cottage.
Well, it can't be helped.
Your life is happening now, right in front of you.
What to do, what to do, what to do. What to do indeed.
Pooh?
Christopher Robin.
No. The tree I remember was in the countryside, not here in London. There's no opening.
I suppose it's where it needs to be.
That's a silly explanation.
Why, thank you.
Pooh, why are you here?
Oh, yes, I need your help. I've lost all of my friends.
Let's get to the bottom of this. Look out, Pooh. Here I come. It would appear that I am stuck.
Have you just eaten honey?
I have not just eaten honey.
I wonder which way.
I always get to where I'm going by walking away from where I have been.
Do you?
That's the way I do it.
Hello, Eeyore.
Christopher Robin, it's you playing again.
Let's go and see if we can find Piglet.
I've already stayed far too long. Hello, everyone. So nice to see you all again.
Why, thank you.
Silly old bear. I was wrong about work. I was wrong about everything, and I've got to get back to my family.
Farewell, Christopher Robin. I would have liked it to go on for a while longer. Perhaps it's our turn to save Christopher. You must be Madeline.
Wait, you're the bear of my father's drawings.
Yes. Do you know where he is?
I do.
Let's bounce! I just saw the most preposterous imposter. Look at him.
Digger! Eel! Piglet!
If anyone wants to clap, now is the time to do it.
Oh, bother. Oh, dear, dear.
I don't remember being cheery.
People say nothing is impossible, but I do nothing every day.
No, Pooh, that's not the... Oh, never mind.
Well, again, the name of this film is Christopher Robin. It's newly imagined from Disney. And joining us today is my guest, Brigham Taylor. Our guest today is producer of the amazing new Disney movie, Christopher Robin. Brigham Taylor, welcome to the podcast. We're so pleased to have you with us today.
It's great to be here.
Really terrific to have you on the eve of the release of this amazing film. Now, so many of us will look at this iconic material that you're taking on and wonder how is it to take on something so beloved by so many in the form of really looking at these characters from a fresh perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you could say it should be daunting, but for me, I've loved these characters since, early childhood, and both from reading the stories, having the stories read to me by my mother, and then seeing the early Disney featurettes, which I still just adore, some of the best work, and so I, as an executive here, which I was for many years until I became a producer, was always keen on the idea of finding a way, because to me, these are very multi-generational stories. When Milne told the stories, there was humor and wit in there that was applied only to the adult reading the story, but there's also all the whimsy that kids were attracted to. And I think that I was really keen to find a story to tell that would give you that multi-generational appeal. And that's why I landed on the idea of what would happen. What would that story be when Christopher hits adulthood, and when these characters and these old friends might seem far less relevant, when in fact they should be entirely relevant. So it was fun. It was daunting, but mostly to me just a thrill to be able to literally sort of set about the task of creating a new story, but be totally loyal to the voices of these familiar old friends.
Well, that's it. I think I'm a little bit your senior, born in 1963, so I definitely grew up with these characters myself, and growing up in Orange County, and having Disneyland kind of in my backyard, and it's just so fun as a grown-up to revisit the stories. But I think we're also introducing these in a new way to a whole new generation, and it strikes me with Christopher Robin that you're really kind of ministering to two generations. You're ministering to the kids that will kind of have the vantage point of these characters from the first time maybe in their life, but also for the grown-ups who love these characters, as parables. Now we see this as kind of a balm to the soul of the overworked society that we're living in. Intentional, right? But how do you balance those two competing priorities, to have fun, but also to kind of tell a parable?
Yeah, no, it's not easy, I don't think, but we get a great head start because Pooh himself, I think, does both those things. I think that he has immense relevance to adults, which is, I think, why it became a literary phenomenon, and then why it continued on in animation. And it was always charming and whimsical for kids. But it was the big goal of this movie to do that same thing, is to, especially since we're telling it through the prism of the adult Christopher Robin's character, who has, at this point in time, has become a bit weighed down with life and the responsibilities and some of the experiences that he's had. And it just asks the question, what's the relevance at this point, midlife, with these sort of silly characters who just set about their little daily routines and have little adventures and little larks and share snacks and so forth. And you're like, this is just as important to us as adults as it would be to a 6-year-old playing with them. And that was, I never doubted that would be the case. And so we set about to sort of try to prove that in telling the story about the value, as Milne puts it, the value of doing nothing, which is really taking time out to just be present with those that you love and just do something simple. And I've never doubted the value of that, and I realized that in rereading these stories about how much I really did believe that, and how much I felt like that was a strong thesis statement for a film that could be super relevant to us as adults and parents, as well as be fun and adventurous from a kid's perspective, just to sort of see this character go on that journey, but also to get into the very sort of the real world of Winnie the Pooh, to have to present them in a sort of photoreal way that we've never experienced before.
Let's talk about that for a few minutes now. First of all, from a production perspective, certainly the location is so relevant, and you shot over in England. And then I'd like to also ask you about kind of the Disney magic of bringing these characters to life in a new animated way that differs from previous iterations of cartoon versions of them.
Yeah, no, it was great. We always felt like this. We should go back to England. We went into Sussex, into the very forests that sort of inspired these stories, that were very near the original 100-acre wood. But that was a goal from early on, to have a very real and grounded environment, both for the woods where the characters lived, and also for the mid-century London city that Christopher Robin finds himself in, and to have a level of sort of visual sophistication that would appeal, again, to older audiences, but wouldn't eliminate, hopefully, younger audiences. So we scoured high and low for the right locations for that, and I think found some beautiful spots, both in the city and in the country. But the other big thrill about tackling this project was the idea of bringing these characters to life in this sort of very real fashion, and to realize that this character began life as a very real teddy bear sitting on the bed of a young child, and it would be taken out into the woods and played with, along with the other characters, the other stuffed animals that he had. And you can go visit those, as I have, in the New York Public Library and see the actual artifacts that are the original Pooh Bear and the others, but to present them in that way that I thought would make them almost all the more magical. And so we told ourselves we wanted to create something that felt simultaneously like a vintage teddy bear, constructed like from the 20s, but it also evoked the images of E.H. Shepard's illustrations as well as the very familiar Disney animated version. And so we tasked our conceptual artists to imagine all those things intersecting in a real way, and we got these beautiful paintings that we felt like really just nailed that. And then we set about building those actual physical objects, just Pooh and Piglet and Tigger and Eeyore and the gang. And we had a very talented team that took those 2D drawings and built out of sort of material that could have been sourced, back in that era. And we landed on versions that felt very loyal to the images the 2D images we fell in love with, and we had those with us on set, always as a reference point. When Ewan or anyone else was interacting with these characters, there would be a real Winnie the Pooh doll right there, and usually being sort of manipulated or puppeteered by an actor who was reading the lines at the time. So Ewan would always have another performer to interact with, and then we'd usually take that puppet away and shoot it without anything, so that we have what we call a clean plate for our visual effects animators to put the final version of Pooh or whoever the character might be in there. And it adds a lot of sort of thinking and math on our part as we're making the shots, because you usually have to do things 2 or 3 different ways to be able to achieve both the give enough visual reference for the camera crew to figure out exactly what they're shooting, and give the actors eye lines to know where they're performing to, and then pull all those things out of the frame so that the visual effects wouldn't have to remove them painstakingly in post-production. So it was oddly a very technical process, but also a very, very charming process, because at the end of the day, we were walking around with these stuffed animals in our arms, and and there wasn't a day you didn't pull those little characters out of their little resting places where people just weren't charmed, or were a new visitor to the set, where the introduction of those characters, those very real stuffed animals, wasn't a magical moment. And so it always kept very, in front of mind what we were trying to achieve, the charm we were trying to achieve with this movie.
Well, it's magical. The end result is phenomenal. And speaking of charming, you certainly are working with an amazing cast here. I mean, of course, Ewan McGregor and his role as Christopher Robin, but for me, Bronte Carmichael, who plays his daughter Madeline, certainly stole the show a little bit. Did you have these new voicings. I kind of worried that I was going to reject new sounding voices as some of my favorite characters, but certainly Jim Cummings, who plays both Pooh and Tigger, and then Brad Garrett surprised me as Eeyore. How was it to work with those guys in their voice roles?
They're all lovely to a person, and luckily, Jim actually stepped in for the legendary Sterling Holloway nearly 30 years ago, and so he has in his own right become the voice of Pooh and Tigger for that matter. Very versatile voiceover actor, and so we were really lucky to have him, and he presents this great continuity for us. Just when you hear the voice, it immediately plugs you into almost any version of this character that you might be familiar with. Brad has actually voiced Eeyore a little bit in the past, and so that's why we sort of pursued him. And Eeyore is all about hitting that wonderfully depressive baritone, and Brad just he can do that in this wonderful fashion. But then we sort of stepped out into new territory when it came to Nick Mohammed for Piglet, who gave us the right sort of pitch and anxiety and of Piglet, and thought he did a wonderful job right down through the rest of the ranks. They felt like they really embodied the personalities that we'd come to sort of expect, both from the page and from the animated films.
So as a parting question, I guess I always have to ask you, a game that we played as little kids in my house, which Pooh character are you? So is there one that you associate most closely with?
We asked this of each other seemingly always on set, and so for me, I would most closely identify with Pooh, only because I love to putter around. I love as busy as you get, I love finding times to be less active and slow things down, and just the absolute joy of doing nothing with your favorite people is something that I've always believed in, and maybe I also find myself to be sometimes a bit simple and with a head full of fluff. But that's I've landed after much thought. I've landed on that. It's probably my Milne avatar is probably Pooh.
That's awesome, and hopefully you like honey a little bit too.
I love it. I do love it. Yeah, you don't have to twist my arm to get a little honey on
so for the family
over there.
For families who are listening and parents out there, any closing thoughts on why this is the movie to go see this week with your family?
Well, I think quite genuinely that it's a multi-generational movie. As I said before, there are things in here that we've strived very hard to make sure that there are messages of equal value to the adults in the audience and to the kids, and quite frankly to everyone in between. And we've tried to be sensitive to having a film that has the charm and the whimsy and the humor that you want for a family film, but also has hopefully some resonance and some dramatic heft to it for us as adults, because we think that Winnie the Pooh and it's sort of his philosophy is something there's real value there, and we wanted to sort of express that in this movie, and not just that he's entertaining and that he's funny and that he's got an amusing, take on the world, but that the idea of us taking time out for each other and being present with each other is of huge value, and maybe as important today as it's ever been. So that's the pitch, and think hopefully you'll laugh and cry and feel a little bit better about the world coming out of this film.
It's perfectly timed for this end of summer for us to remember that now's the time to grab some time with our family and friends, and maybe just take it down a notch. And certainly by going out to the movies, you start off a weekend of a very fun chance to take advantage of what matters most to families. So again, our guest today has been Brigham Taylor. Brigham, thank you for not only this film, but all the great work that you do for families, and best of luck with this one. And for whatever comes next, you'll be in our thoughts and prayers. God bless.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Well, that's it for this extra edition of Lisa, Hendey and Friends. It's so fun to pop in and to share something with you for the weekend to enjoy. And do consider, if you're going to go out and see a movie this weekend, checking out Christopher Robin. I promise you won't be disappointed. It's family fun for the entire family. Until next week, I hope you and yours have an amazing week. Do something fun. Have a little bit of downtime. Just go to your happy spot and maybe eat some honey. Until next time, friends, God bless. Have a great weekend.
Introducing the redesigned CatholicSingles.com, featuring new ways that put the spotlight on the person and their faith, not just a profile picture. For the past 20 years, faithful Catholics have used CatholicSingles.com, and the reimagined CatholicSingles.com website is ready to help single Catholics take the next step in sharing meaningful relationships with other faithful Catholics. Remember, CatholicSingles.com for faith, fellowship, and love.